Let's review APUSH Unit 1. The first big idea is to see what society was like before and after Europeans arrived. We're going to start before Christopher Columbus arrives in what's known as Pre-Columbian Society. So the main idea here is that Native Americans had complex societies. I know, how surprising. People first arrived in America, so they're Bering Strait around 1400 years before Common Era. They obviously adapted to the different environments in North America to create different societies. And the next OI is going to be maize. This spreads from modern-day Mexico to the American Southwest and changes nomadic hunter-gatherers to agricultural societies. This boosts economic development and social diversification. In the Southwest, you have the Pueblo people and others. They made adobe structures, grew maize, and built advanced irrigation systems. And in the Great Plains, you had tribes like the Sioux, who were nomadic hunter-gatherers that hunted bison. And they did this because there were very few natural resources and no fertile soil. And then on the East Coast, tribes like the Huron and the Iroquois formed alliances and developed hunter-gatherer and agricultural societies. So they would hunt for half the year and then farm for the other half. And then in the Pacific Northwest, there was near infinite resources in the form of fish, animals, forests, and the ocean, which tribes like the Chinook capitalized on. Farming was great in the Mississippi River Valley and allowed for tribes like the Cahokia to develop massive settlements of up to 20,000 people. And the conclusion to this is that natives had diverse societies shaped by the environment and complex societies with extensive trade networks. And also they believe in animism, which is the belief that non-human beings also had a spiritual essence, so that explains their deep ties to nature. Now we're going to talk about European exploration and how it changed the Americas. So the three major motives for European exploration were gold, God, and glory. And the big idea here is mercantilism. This is just the belief that wealth is finite and you need to conquer other nations to become richer and more powerful. And exploration was actually made possible by the use of the compass, astrolabe, better map-making techniques, and the caravel, which was a small and specialized sailing ship. And everything changes because of the Columbian Exchange. So this was just an exchange of plants, animals, disease, and ideas between Europe and the New World, and the most important of which was disease. So diseases like smallpox and measles caused the Great Dying, which decimated native populations. And the big players in early exploration were Spain and Portugal. After the Treaty of Tordesillas, where the two countries agreed to divvy up the New World, Spain is the first to colonize North America with St. Augustine in 1565. And conquistadors like Hernan Cortez saw wealth and power in the New World. And specifically, Cortez wipes out the Aztec Empire through disease and because of superior weaponry, and makes Spain very, very rich. And the Spanish also implemented the encomienda system, where they exploited natives for labor in agriculture and mining. They forcibly converted natives to Catholicism as well. And overall, they just destroyed the native way of life. Sepulveda wrote Just Causes for War against the Indians, which justified the Spanish oppression of natives, while others like De las Casas wrote a short account of the destruction of the Indies, which criticized Spanish exploitation of the natives. And the Black Legend is just the view that the Spanish unleashed atrocities against the natives, which was true. However, this sentiment was later used by the English to justify their own colonization, which wasn't much better. One way the natives sought to maintain their way of life was through alliances like the Iroquois League. This was the first semblance of democracy in America and was more efficient and organized than previous alliances. Other ways of maintaining their way of life included directly rebelling, such as in the Pueblo Rebellion by Pope in 1680. Tired of colonists intruding on their way of life, the Pueblo killed Spaniards and burnt their churches, but the Spanish ultimately returned to the area and subjugated the natives once again. However, this time they tolerated the Pueblo's way of life just a little bit more. Ultimately, Christian and Native American religions blended through syncretism, and these people began to intermarry, showing how Pueblos influenced the culture of the Southwest. And soon, England is going to join this colonization race. However, they do not intermarry and trade within the natives like other European powers, but all powers are looking to exploit the New World for wealth, power, and resources. Now let's talk about England's southern colonies. So the first successful colonies were in the Chesapeake region in Maryland and Virginia, and the first successful settlement was the founding of Jamestown in 1607 by the Virginia Company, which was a joint stock company. And the motive for these colonies was quick and easy wealth. None of the settlers came prepared. They thought they would just get rich quick and go home. And some of them came because they thought they would be given rights as an English citizen. Then lots of people died in a period known as starving time because they were ill-prepared. However, John Smith saves them by introducing no work, no food policies. But John Rolfe actually saves Jamestown by introducing tobacco, which makes the settlement actually profitable. And soon, Jamestown is booming. And since the South's climate was suited for agriculture, cash crops like tobacco took off and jump-started a plantation system which required lots and lots of labor. They originally used indentured servants whose trip to the colonies was sponsored by the rich in the headright system. And basically, this rich investor would receive the right to land if their indentured servant worked 7 years. The House of Burgesses was eventually established in 1619 as the first representative government, but was mostly dominated by wealthy plantation owners. Still, it set the stage for later ideas of representation. Obviously, since the colonists needed land and labor because of the plantation system, they ran into problems very, very quickly. There were lots of tensions with the natives, specifically the Powhatan tribe. The colonists and the natives fight a war known as the Anglo-Powhatan Wars. There was a temporary ceasefire with the marriage of John Rolfe and Pocahontas, the daughter of the chief, but natives eventually get tired of the continual taking of their land, so they start the massacre of 1622. Eventually, the Virginia Company goes broke because of these wars, and Jamestown becomes a royal colony. By 1646, the Powhatan Confederacy is pretty much wiped out. Now for the problem of labor. So indentured servants were fed up with their treatment even after becoming free. They had the worst land, which was close by native land, and no political power. So Nathaniel Bacon leads a rebellion and burns Jamestown to the ground. The rebellion collapses, unfortunately, and the plantation elite realizes that they can't use indentured servant anymore, so you see the shift towards slavery. And this shift to slave labor also ties into the triangle trade, where enslaved Africans were sent to the Americas and had to endure the atrocities of the Middle Passage. And this also showed the tension between social classes amongst the colonists. Now, Maryland, on the other hand, was a proprietorship, which meant that the king gave land to be colonized. Just like Virginia, a plantation system is established. But they also passed the Act of Toleration to protect only Christians from Protestant England, which shows that there were religious reasons for settlement. Now, in the other southern colonies, life was very similar. South Carolina had rice as its cash crop and a plantation elite. They heavily relied on slavery. North Carolina, on the other hand, had smaller tobacco farmers and were less reliant on slavery. Georgia was supposed to be a buffer zone against the Spanish, meant to be inhabited by criminals. Originally, there was no slavery allowed, but no one came, so the restrictions were eventually lifted. Now we're going to talk about the northern colonies. So some key differences were that the northern colonies were founded for religious reasons, had a more proportionate demographic because they were permanent settlers, emphasized the family unit, and had a mixed economy, unlike the South's heavy reliance on agriculture. Even though England was Protestant, it was pretty much the same old corrupt Catholic Church, so Puritans wanted to purify the church while radical separatists known as the Pilgrims wanted to break away. The Pilgrims boarded the Mayflower to find a new settlement and signed the Mayflower Compact, which was the first example of self-government as all church-going males could vote, and it was a majority rule situation. The Pilgrims end up landing in Plymouth and have no idea how to survive, but local native leader Squanto helps them, and this leads to the first Thanksgiving. Now, as for the Puritans, John Winthrop establishes a proprietorship colony in Massachusetts. He wanted to form a perfect theocracy, so there was a heavy emphasis on education and family, religious toleration, but only for Puritans, and the church was the state. There was the town hall meetings in which church-going males could democratically vote on issues, and their economy was also a mixed one. But not everyone was happy, though. Roger Williams questioned Puritan leadership and called for the separation of church and state. He gets banished from Massachusetts and forms Providence, Rhode Island, the first colony with complete religious toleration. Anne Hutchinson held her own private Bible studies, which was legal, challenged the accepted role of women, and also defied church authorities, so she was also banished. And in addition, the Salem witch trials also happened around this time. Around 19 people were hung and one was beaten to death. Accusations could be based on any evidence, and most of the accused were wealthier women who were accused by poorer classes. This also showed some class conflict and also religious dissent. People felt as if the reason for the founding of the colony slowly shifted from religious to monetary, as exemplified by the lucrative Dutch fur trade in which many of the northern colonies participated in. Though the northern colonists treated natives better, they weren't that much better. So there were rising tensions with the native Pequot tribe, which led to the Pequot War in the 1630s, where the tribe was pretty much wiped out. The colonists even formed a military alliance with all the northern colonies except Rhode Island, known as the New England Confederation. Metacom's War, or King Philip's War, was fought in the 1640s and waged by King Metacomet of the Wampanoag tribe to rid the colonists off their land. They lose, marking the last major resistance to the northern colonies. So now we're going to go over the middle colonies, or the breadbasket colonies, because they provided most of the food to the colonies. New York was originally a Dutch colony but was taken over. Pennsylvania was founded by William Penn for the Quakers. The Quakers were pacifists that were marginalized in England, so they sought refuge in the New World. They had a representative government, bought land from natives, had religious freedom, and even provided some rights for women. So notice how progressive their ideas are. Keep this in mind because Pennsylvania will be a key player in the American Revolution. And again, their economy was based on growing food and a little bit of trade. Now, I want to emphasize some key points about colonial society. First of all, conflict between England and its colonies is pretty much inevitable. Because of mercantilism, England feels like its colonies are entitled to enrich itself. But through salutary neglect, England let the colonies alone for a while because it had internal issues. So then the colonists turned to self-governance in the form of the town hall meetings or the Mayflower Compact and also the House of Burgesses, and everything worked out great. They dealt with internal issues without the help of England. Then England tried to reinstate control through the Navigation Acts, which restricted trade, and the Dominion of New England, which sought to bring the colonies under direct rural power. Obviously, these were very unpopular, and colonists weren't happy. England had left them alone for so long, so why are they coming back now? During this time, the Enlightenment was taking off too, so you had ideas like John Locke's natural rights and the social contract being spread around, which undoubtedly influenced the colonists. In addition, the Zenger trial made advancements in free speech. Basically, John Peter Zenger published a harsh critique of the governor in New York, who then sued him for defamation. The court sided with Zenger, setting the precedent that free speech was allowed and even criticizing the government was allowed so long as it was true. These new ideas and policies set the stage for rising tensions, which feed directly into the American Revolution. And in addition, the First Great Awakening had a profound impact on society as well. This movement was led by Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield, who were known to deliver fiery, impassioned sermons, such as Sinners in the Hands of Angry God. There were many new beliefs during this time, similar to that of a priesthood of all believers seen in Europe. That is, all people can interpret the Bible for themselves and have a more personal relationship with God away from church authorities. In addition, the halfway covenant was passed to make the church more lax on what it took to be a member, and this greatly engaged engagement within the church. People who agreed with these new ideas are usually called the New Lights, while those still clinging on to the old ways are known as the Old Lights. And the impact of this is massive, starting with education. You see the rise of universities like Dartmouth and the other Ivy Leagues that we know today. There's also a lot more religious diversity and independence, as well as calls to separate the church and state. People also started advocating for equality thanks to new ideas of a more personal relationship with God, as everyone can have that relationship with God, not just the elite. So this is the first truly national movement that broke social class divides, geographical borders, and racial divides too. People question traditional church authorities. So who is to say that they won't start questioning the authority of the government as well? And in addition, another development during this time was the development of slavery. As time went on, more and more slave codes were passed to keep enslaved people trapped forever. You see this in acts like the Partus Sequitur Venetrum, which stated the status of freedom of a child would be determined by the status of freedom of their mother. The acts concerning servants and slaves banned black people from owning white servants, penalized those who presided over interracial marriages, banned enslaved people from owning weapons, and also banned blacks from testifying against whites in court, regardless of their status of freedom. The Security Act required white-going churchmen to carry firearms when attending church to prevent a possible rebellion. And other codes included keeping enslaved people illiterate, enforcing a curfew, no equality under the law, and banning the gathering of more than 3 enslaved people at a time. So obviously, the slaves resisted this cruel system through subtle and defiant means. One of the most famous defiance against slavery was Stono's Rebellion, led by Jemmy. They struck on a Sunday when everyone was at church and were planning to march to Florida, where the Spanish promised them freedom. Unfortunately, the rebels were crushed and many of them were hung or executed. Now, as a result of this rebellion, more and more oppressive slave codes were passed to prevent a future one. However, this rebellion showed that people from all walks of life deserve freedom and were willing to fight for it, even die for it. This not only echoed ideas of the American Revolution later on, but sets the stage for the Civil Rights Movement. So that is all for APUSH Unit 1 review. Please consider subscribing, liking, and commenting if you found this video to be of value. Thank you for your viewership, and I hope to see you in the next one.